Welcome into this edition of Making the Leap. Glad to have you here. Today we bring back a friend for I don't know if we're going to start handing out patches or jackets for
I don't know,
multiple
making
visits.
Award, do a trophy, something. Yes.
Ginny Gentles will be with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about something that's not, I guess, specific to Christian education, though it's certainly something that every school, public, private, probably even homeschoolers are dealing with, and that's phones, the pervasiveness of phones, and what schools' policies are or aren't, and ages. And so anyway, we'll get into some of that as well as some other cultural issues. Always appreciate your reviews. We start today with a new review from Bobby Bearcat. That's probably an homage to our college, I would guess.
I'm thinking.
That was our mascot. We're Northwest Missouri State grads,
Yes.
and Bobby Bearcat was our mascot. So I assume this is probably from a fellow Northwest alum.
Yes.
It left a 5-star review. Thank you. And said, the blessing to go through the exact same thing at the exact same time is not lost on me. It's nice to know that people are going through the same things we are, and the help is immeasurable. Making the leap helps making the leap to private Christian education
Which
possible.
is awesome.
So how nice is that? That's from Bobby Bearcat.
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
I'm glad you're going through it. I know it is tough, and it's why we started the podcast, and it's been fascinating to hear from so many people who have just boundless energy and passion for it. It's becoming.
Well, last week talking with the women that are starting the school out of Cameron, like that's amazing. Watching the parents that are coming into, we now know of, again, there's another family that we know that is moving their kids from public education into a Christian education realm. A different family that we know has reached out. They're taking a tour of a school nearby and looking, and it's really a cool place to be at, to watch that journey unfold, knowing ours now is coming to the end of a 2-year place. Like, it feels like yesterday a little bit. And then in some ways I'm like, man, we have done a lot in the 2 years with this, and how we've seen our daughter grow and change, how you and I have grown and changed with just not this podcast piece, but having our daughter in that place has just been incredible. And so I like getting the review, the feedback, knowing that there are parents.
Jenny also does a podcast where she talks about the legislative aspects of this. So if
students over systems.
If you're very interested specifically in what states, what state capitals, what governors at the federal level, what's happening legislatively in education.
She's very steeped in that.
We don't do so much of that, but she does because she's near the swamp. So that's kind of.
And she's a good background in education policy and reform and things like she's just very measured in her approach. I always enjoy talking with her. So I would definitely check that podcast out for her as well. We are here today with Ginny Gentles, who we've had on before. We are now our third person.
She's becoming a regular.
She's a regular.
I think, Jenny, you have the distinction of being our most frequent guest now. Congratulations. You get frequent flyer mileage.
Oh, thank you so much. I am honored, truly.
Well, I know you're doing a lot of, work in the podcast world. We talked with you actually when your podcast launched. I know I'm watching the different things that you get involved in when you're with your work with IWF, which I think is just tremendous.
That's Independent Women's Forum.
I forget. Not everybody knows all the acronyms. Yes. But I was so, reaching out to you and talking because I also, beyond all the political and all the, that world where it's just, I feel like a constant barrage of information. More than that, and most importantly, you're a mom. Like, you're just a mom. You're like me. Chris is a dad. We've just got these issues, I think, that are always surrounding our kids. And so I wanted to go ahead and have some conversation around the idea of just being a parent, what that is like, the world of, this Christian education world, and what you're doing in that world with regards to the school that you have your daughter at.
Yes, well, I feel very fortunate to have been able to enroll both of my daughters in faith-based schools. We left the public school system when the public school system abandoned us, and that was during the school closures in 2020. And really, the school stayed closed in my area for over a year. But then we realized we didn't want to return when the schools opened again. They were not prioritizing academic instruction, and they were not teaching anything that really mirrored the values of our family. And so I was able to find a K-8, just sweet small faith-based school in Arlington, Virginia, where I live. And that worked for both of my daughters last year. And then this year, my older daughter started high school. She's just finishing up ninth grade. And I kept her in a faith-based school. And that's been the right fit for our family. And I feel fortunate that we were able to afford that. And it has inspired me as a school choice advocate to want to push even harder to make sure that families have options so that they can all take advantage of this.
What's the status of things in Virginia? Virginia became sort of the most famous of all the states for the fight over school choice. Glenn Youngkin's election sort of hinged on that as a subject. Is that still as white hot? I've heard from certain school choice advocates that the issue has maybe it's not as flashpoint as maybe it was a year ago. Have you noticed that, or are the parents still engaged and as passionate on the issue?
Well, I'd say that the parents are engaged and passionate when it comes to school choice and ensuring that they have options. And for sure, parents continue to be engaged in the desire to ensure that their local school districts are listening to them. The impression that I've gotten throughout Governor Youngkin's administration is that he's more focused on the latter. He wants to fix public schools. He wants to ensure that parents are heard. He wants to hold public schools accountable for the absolutely abysmal learning loss and just really deeply upsetting test scores that you see coming out of the pandemic. And he has not put really any effort into supporting what we think of as school choice or educational freedom.
Does that surprise you?
I think I was paying close enough attention to the campaign to realize that he recognized that that voters were animated by some cultural issues that were starting to get a lot of attention. If you think way back to when he was running for office in 2021, it kind of seems like a lifetime ago. The issues around critical race theory were just getting a lot of attention, and there was some attention around the sexually explicit and books and some of the questionable materials that were being put in front of children. That was a really animating issue for his race. And then really a lot of parents voted for him because they were mad that schools were closed. And so that kind of got lost in the cultural stuff. But I think he recognized as a candidate and now as a governor that was very animating for parents. It mattered to them when schools were closed, and it mattered that the schools stopped teaching their kids, and it matters that the test scores are horrible, and that Florida, I'm from Florida, but I live in Virginia. Virginia, used to be consider itself like, doing a pretty good job when it comes to public education. You can't say that anymore. We're bottom of the pack on by some measures now, with the learning loss and the slide, and so those are the things that he's focused on. He's a data guy too, so I think he just he's really gotten caught up in the scores and the data. And unfortunately, governors in Virginia can only stay in office for one term.
Right.
Like they can't run for a subsequent term right afterwards. So he's going to run out of time to start advocating for school choice if he doesn't do that leading into the next legislative session. I hope he will. Sounds like
Winsome Sears is interested in stepping into that role, though. I've interviewed her before, and it sounds like she may. I don't know if she shares the same agenda. But let me ask you this, Jenny. I'm conflicted about this, and I know Christine probably is too. Or maybe not. I don't mean to speak for you. But can we nibble around the edges and save and reconstruct public schools in our image, or are we more interested in fighting for choice to take our kids elsewhere? Where do you feel your energies are focused?
Well, I think throughout my career, I've been pretty clear that we absolutely have to ensure that families have options to leave, because systems do not turn around quickly. They are not responsive to the needs of individuals, whether that's students or parents. School boards might flip as far as who's in charge, but they'll flip right back. And I've seen it over the years. Where I've shifted a little in my thinking on this is that absolutely we've got to push forward as hard as possible and ensure that families have options and advocate for school choice. But it's not just so that families can leave. I think that expanding school choice programs to these universal programs that we're seeing around the country is going to empower the families who really want to stay, who are like, I love sending my kid to school down the street. I'm not one of those, but there are those families. I love that the kids in my neighborhood can walk to school together. That sort of geography is really important to them, but they don't have a voice. I think that when we see these big expansions for eligibility, those parents are going to be able to say to the school district, to the principal, to the bureaucrats, listen to me. Like, you have to start listening to me because now I can and I will leave. And so that gives them leverage and a voice.
And just so we're clear, we're talking about, just again, because I just want to make sure everybody understands the terminology here, only 7 states, I think, Oklahoma most recently has just signed on to this. And this is the concept that you can take the money that the state allocates to your student and you can take it and spend it anywhere you see fit. So you'd be able to walk into your public school and say, hey, you want my kid's money? I want to give it to you, but I need some certain concessions from you or what have you. It gives the parent buying power is what you're saying.
Right. And so over 30 states have private school choice programs, but that education savings accounts, ESAs, where you have the pot of money that would have been allocated by the state to be spent on your child on a per pupil basis, that's set aside in an account, an education savings account, an ESA. It's a flexible account that you can draw down from for educational expenses, including tuition. It's often tuition, but also, as you said, those other expenses. And depending on who's counting, it's like 11 to 13 states have these ESAs, and this year it's quite remarkable the number of states that have passed those programs.
I love hearing about the states that are doing it. And of course, like you said, it brings up a lot of discussion, but the best thing about it is that competition piece of it. You want me to stay as a family in this public school, then you're going to need to meet me and every other parent, basically raise that bar, raise that level so that we have some of that healthy competition, because we all know that competition can breed excellence. It can be a catalyst to help turn some of these schools around, but like you said, it is going to be a process for sure. I'd reached out to you. I'm really always intrigued by parents that are invested, no matter what the realm, invested in their kids' education. And you and I had talked a little bit, and you had said that there was an article, you sent it to me, I read it, that kind of spurred you to reach out to your principal at your daughter's school regarding the cell phone policy. And when I read that from you, I very much felt that was important, because I think it's important to stay involved, whether you are sitting in a public school, whether you are moving your kids into, like we have ours moved in, or our daughter moved into a Christian school, staying connected with what is happening with our schools and what their decisions are, regardless of whether, you feel like that sense of relief, like, oh, I've got my child where, we've got some like-minded families, everything's going to be okay. But you always want to stay involved and you always want to stay connected. And I think when you said you reached out to your principal, I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, because this cell phone issue, the social media issues, these are huge when we're talking about our kids. I think we have these public school issues, but at a broader level, we have a real issue going on with what's happening in our kids with their phones or lack of phones.
Well,
or
we should mention the
social
piece.
Media. Yes.
It's in the Free Press. It's headlined, "The Parents Saying No to Smartphones, How You Help Them Learn to Be Present and a Task with a Relationship. One of the top challenges of a generation." Part of that is saying no. This is a lengthy piece. It prints off to be about 17 pages, Jenny. But you read this piece, and it inspired you to engage in your own school on this front.
Well, it absolutely did. And actually, I was writing to thank my school. Well, one of them. So again, I've got a child in a sweet little K-8 faith-based school, and then I have another child in a large Catholic high school. And that K-8 school does not allow cell phones, and they had to send out a reminder to parents, look, this is part part of our policy, and we don't want this to be part of the culture of our school. Do not send your device with the child. For some of the kids, they might be staying after school for aftercare, and they might need to reach their parents at some point. They can put cell phones in their backpack, but there absolutely are no cell phones in classrooms. Certainly not in the hallway, not in the lunchroom or at recess, and that. I just feel so grateful that I've got a sixth grader there who is going to go through middle school without seeing cell phones in her school. And when I read an article like this, it's the parents saying no to smartphones, it's clear that that is not the culture in most schools, and the article was largely focused on public schools. And that the parents have not been saying no, and the schools have not been saying no, and now we're in trouble. It's like we're years down the road since the smartphone has been invented, and we're seeing just the damage that's been done. These kids can't concentrate. Their social skills are abysmal. They're addicted to these phones. They're staring at them as they walk through class or walk through the hallways. They're staring at them at lunch instead of talking to each other. And they have access to content that, parents have got to wake up and realize is extremely explicit and extremely addictive. And so to be in a small private school that's gently but firmly reminding parents it's a no. It might be a yes in your home, but it's a no in our school. It's just a real blessing, and I'm so grateful for that.
Go ahead.
Well, no, just this piece says many parents say they don't want their kids to develop the same dysfunctional relationship with technology that they have. A direct quote, the kids, they don't realize they have a problem even though they're on their device for 18 hours a day and flunking out of school because most addicts don't see their addiction as a problem when they're in the middle of it. And yet you will hear parents say, I've heard it myself, you can't possibly take little so-and-so's phone away. I have to be able to reach them. It's such a weird mentality, but it's true. A lot of adults insist their kids have them, which is an odd thing to me, but it's very real.
Yeah, the article says by age 12, 7 out of 10 American kids own a smartphone. So that's not a phone, like a flip phone.
Right.
That's a smartphone. That's staggering to me, just if you think about the expense, keeping up a cell phone plan, and then also buying the smartphones for children. But it's also very sad when you think that at such a young age, their brains are forming around these highly addictive apps, just the highly addictive device itself, and so the rest of their life they're going to be trying to break those habits that they're forming at such a young age. This absolutely is impacting classroom instruction. When teachers are trying to get the attention of their students, and the students are staring at their phones instead. That's unfortunate. Of course, they're disruptive if students are sharing videos with each other instead of paying attention to the teacher. It can be disruptive for classroom projects if the kids are asked to work in teams, and one child might be trying to do the assignment, the other kids are staring at their phone. It just, again, the phone, it's taking away from instruction. So an encouraging thing in the article is that an increasing number of school districts, they cite Ohio, Maryland, Colorado, and some other states, have banned the devices in class, but it sounds like enforcement is not going particularly well.
I think that's probably one of the hardest things. I know at the beginning of this past school year, our junior and senior came home, and they were horrified by the cell phone policy that was being enacted at their school. They're at a public school, and they came home and they were like, what is this craziness? And I remember we were all sitting outside, we were talking, and they just thought it was ludicrous. And our daughter just laughed, and she said, welcome to my world. We don't get a phone at lunch and here and there, because she's in this different environment. And I said, well, I'm not going to argue. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Teachers shouldn't have to compete, no matter whatever realm it is, public, private, it doesn't matter to me. No one should have to compete with a device for that learning time. That's important. And so they were telling us, well, the teachers said they're going to have like a hanging, some like hanging bag, and we all have to put our phones in there, and then we can pick them up at the end. But then one of them said, well, my so-and-so teacher said he's not even going to bother. We can keep our phones as long as we don't have them out. And so I thought, well, right there, that you're shooting yourself in the foot. The school is going to have a battle no matter what. And I'm sure some of that comes from parents at home, the teacher's own opinions about it, if they feel they can still engage the kids without worrying about it, if it's not worth the hassle. And I think that's a lot of it comes down to, you're there to teach, but now you have to be a quote unquote, a police officer. You have to, be on top of it all the time. And it's so hard, I think, for teachers to be in that position, especially when they have parents behind them saying, my kid can keep their phone, no problem. You're not going to, take that from me. So I love that there is enforcement at your daughter's school, because that is, I think, you talk about that proverbial line in the sand. I think we parents, are going to have to continually do it. Teachers, administrators are going to have to do it and figure out, where that line is going to be.
Yeah. The Surgeon General, Jenny, Vivek Murthy, said, finally, this was just
came out.
May 23rd. U.S. Surgeon General issues major advisory on social media use and teens' mental health, warning an urgent public health issue regarding social media usage and kids' mental health. The advisory comes weeks after the American Psychological Association issued sweeping recommendations intended to help teenagers use social media safely. This particular story references kids all the way up to 19 years of age. So, and I've certainly seen it. I mean, look, if I had it to do all over again, I wouldn't have given our kids phones as early as we did, but we did. You're telling us that your kids do not have them, I trust, given the things you've said, I'm guessing?
Well, this is something that I want to make sure that parents are clear on. Flip phones still exist.
Yeah.
So if your concern is that you need to be able to reach your child, you can get them a flip phone. And I think the parents forgot that, right? Like they thought, well, technology moved on. And so if I'm going to get a child a phone so that I can reach my child, so that I can coordinate with my child when we're doing pickups and activities, it has to be a smartphone. But it doesn't.
Right.
And my daughter is the least cool when it comes to phones in her high school. She, to her way of telling it, she's the only one with a flip phone. But from what I've seen in another article I read recently, it's actually becoming a trend. So I'm letting her know that she's a retro trendsetter.
Does your daughter give you a hard time about it? Does she
really
beg you about it, or not really? No?
No, not really. She sees. When you don't have the cell phone, your head's not down as you're shuffling through the hall, and you look around and you see what's going on. And when you read like she does, I mean, and still have your powers of concentration, you notice the difference between yourself and other kids who cannot focus, who cannot concentrate, and she doesn't want that.
Yep.
So, to be honest, if she's on a group text or whatever, it just goes to my phone because, she can't see the fun little things that people share. So, she does use my cell phone for group texts and whatnot. And, I'd want her to stay plugged in for those sorts of things. But I do want parents to know there are alternatives out there. There are flip phones, and apparently they're coming back. It's like a retro cool thing. And this article that we were talking about, the parents saying no to smartphones, they mention a phone that looks like a smartphone, but actually just has features for texting, calling, and a GPS tracker. So that kid's not going to be on TikTok melting their brain, but I guess they won't, look as uncool because their phone looks kind of like other phones.
I like that. The wait till 8th pledge. I mean, again, we're past that piece. But I have I've heard a lot of parents taking that wait till 8th pledge. Wait till you get, just to at least a point of a little bit of awareness in your child of what they have access to, what they can see. And I thought, well, that's also a start. I'm always a fan of just, for a parent that's hesitant or not sure, like a baby step your way on into it. So, if you feel like, oh, I can't do that, well, maybe you can wait till 8th instead of 6th, or maybe you can wait till 7th instead of 5th. I think programs like that, or, just those mini little online pledge type things, I think they're a start, and they let parents know they're not alone in that also, because it does become something hard. I know we used to take our kids' phones I remember it was actually early high school, and they hated it. They were the only ones whose parents took the cell phones at night, and we were like, well, you don't need them in your room. You don't have that. And anytime I could find a parent who also did the same thing, it felt it just felt good to just have that camaraderie a little bit, it's just a nice thing to have. So I that in that article, that wait till 8th, I thought was an interesting, a good idea. I've seen little pieces of it here and there. I thought that was a good idea too.
Yeah, I definitely want to learn more about that initiative. And I liked the idea that another father in the article mentioned that he had parents at his child's Catholic school sign the pledge. And 45% of them signed the pledge.
Said. Yeah.
Encouraging kids to wait until they're older to have phones. And that's where we need to all come together. The parents in the school need to be working together. Parents should not be working against school policies when schools are trying to get these phones out of the kids' hands. And parents should be working together so that parents aren't feeling alone when they're trying to delay the phones, or in my case, simplify the technology.
Does your older daughter, her school does not have a policy like that? Did you approach the principal at all on that?
They have a policy where you're not allowed to have the cell phones with you in the classroom. So they have the pouches.
Yes, that's mentioned. What I was trying to think of, the right term. Yes, the pouch, the bags with the pouches. Mm-hmm. Well, I
I did contact the school about that because it sounds like as we've gotten to the end of the school year, the enforcement maybe hasn't been as strict, and I wanted to check in with them to see, hey, you're going to start the school year strong? I encourage you to do that. I'm on your team.
Yes, which is good for anybody to hear. I think everybody, I think that is something teachers need to hear from.
I'll just say to you anecdotally, this is again our experience. Here's what I know is true. Every time we took phones from our kids as punishment, and we would do that, just being perfectly honest with you, particularly our oldest, I noticed an immediate change in his ability to focus, in his attitude just generally. And I don't think he'd ever confess to that, but I know as a parent, I saw it instantly. He changed immediately. It was like a trance was broken. I don't even know that you agree with that assessment, but I just saw him. In fact, I've asked them before, could we go on a fishing trip for the weekend and just leave the phone locked away? I think they could, but it would be real hell for them. And I'm sorry to say, in retrospect, these are things as a parent that I've learned too late. Right. But boy, if I could pass something on to parents, there shouldn't be any rush to this smartphone thing. You're absolutely right, Jenny.
Well, I think that you've got all the studies to back you up now. That's where it's hard. For those of you with older teenagers, you were just kind of going along with the tide. But we've got studies. We've got TikTok. It had to get really, really bad. Really highly addictive algorithms. The very clear harm to girls, to female adolescents when you're talking about eating disorders, and then also girls getting sucked down into the trans identities and gender fluid identities. These things became very clear in the last, really, it seems like 2 years, and so now we're very slow to figure out what are we going to do about it.
No, I mean, we waited till middle school. I mean, Jenny, we waited till middle school, and I thought we were being strict.
Well, we were actually we were one of the last.
And I mean, like middle school, and I thought, oh well, we're not going to be one of these unreasonable people that gives our elementary school kids phones. But really, middle school was too early in hindsight. But whatever.
I know it's a weird place, but I appreciate it because I do think as we're talking about school options and school choice and all these different, there's so much to consider. But what we have going on in our kids' brains is so, it's dramatic. This growth, this development is so dramatic. What we're putting into our kids' social realms is dramatic. And I really liked when you said, I wrote a letter in support of our, to our principal. And I just thought, that's awesome. And this article was really great. And then this, a new study was released. And I just thought all of it kind of came together for good. And so I wanted to do this as a way to encourage other parents.
And what a great refresher,
well.
Ginny Gentles, that you wrote a letter of positive reinforcement.
Yes.
I don't know how much teachers and administrators get letters of, hey, thanks for being tough. Thanks for doing the hard thing. Yeah. That's an important point.
Well, I heard right back, so I believe that the principal was happy to get that positive feedback. But we do need to tell them when we're grateful for the option to attend this school, and then the opportunity, and that we're grateful for the direction that they're providing. I think that's really important. I don't take it for granted. When you've had an option that wasn't working for your child, you don't take the one that is working.
Yes.
And the policies that are aligned with your values for granted ever again. One other thing to mention is that some school districts are suing some of these social media companies.
Yes, I've read that.
We need to, as parents, we need to recognize that these school districts and these schools are trying to put these policies in place to cut down on this phone addiction and the distraction that they are providing, and that they are literally suing the social media companies for the harm that they're doing to students. So as parents, what are we doing? It can't just be the schools and the school districts with their policies and their lawsuits.
No, and it shouldn't ever be just the schools or school districts. It should be the parents, on their front doing what they can. Absolutely. No, I think that's important. I definitely want to keep track of that, because that's, I don't want the schools, like anything else, like every other issue, I don't want them stepping in to be doing the job that we as parents need to be doing.
We should be doing. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Ginny Gentles, it's been a pleasure catching up with you again. Thanks for your insights today.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always great to talk.
And where can people find you best? Where would you prefer? I know you get your own podcast as well, but and you do some writing. Where would you recommend people go?
Well, I do have the Students Over Systems podcast, where I talk to largely policymakers about education freedom policies. And then over at IWF.org/EFC, you can find the work of our Education Freedom Center.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for taking the time to talk with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. I always enjoy talking with her. I think I'm going to make a little award. Like, she's going to be our recurring person. She
great
really
insights,
has.
And a great reminder to take a minute to say thanks for the hard work you're putting in at this school to keep us on the rails and set a different standard than the rest of the world.
I was thinking about that a lot. Like, I think we, so many parents, I think, were looking for a place to go, coming out of COVID and things like that. And they put their kids in, and, you have to adjust to the expectations that are there in front of you. And so for a school, if it's a no cell phone policy, or if it's a stricter dress code, or whatever it is, you're buying into that. You're agreeing to come alongside that. And if you are seeing what you're seeing and you want to support it, I think they need to recognize or be recognized for that.
Yep.
If it's, I don't know. I just think things like that are important. We can't just put them in the school, whatever option it is. You've removed them from one and put them in somewhere else, and then forget when they're trying hard. And same goes for the public school systems. If our kids had actually gotten in trouble in high school for having a cell phone in class when they shouldn't, fine by me. Go ahead and take it. I will happily shut it off here. We definitely would come alongside that, because just in conversation, when they want to pick up a phone and we're talking, I want to go through the roof. And that's as a parent at home. And I think they know. I mean, I just kind of send that glare and and they know. And I think most teachers would prefer having that support and that acknowledgement.
Let us know how you're dealing with phones and issues like that. We'd love to hear from you. I don't know if you have a school policy on that, if you have an at-home policy on that, if your kids still don't have cell phones and you're going to keep it that way. The flip phone Jenny mentioned was kind of interesting. I'd love to. We always love to get your feedback. Let us know how you're handling this.
Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe your school is like, nope. We need, not only are phones fine, but you need to access everything. through a phone if you don't have an iPad or what, that kind of thing. So maybe it's even the opposite, and maybe that's a struggle as well. You can send us any kind of feedback, any kind of info. We have an email address that you can use, hello@makingtheleappodcast.com. You can go ahead and contact us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Making the Leap Podcast, Twitter at making_the_leap podcast.
Thanks for your reviews.
Yeah, so I was going to say,
your reviews.
Downloading.
Written reviews at Apple Podcasts. Spotify now has comments. What did you think about this episode? So if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave remarks and comments. And the 5-star reviews are very helpful. Always sharing this, too, is great help.
It's wonderful.
Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, too. Subscribe.
Thank you. And we will be back with you next week.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.